Bakugo versus Reze. Two explosion-based power systems clashing together at high-octane speeds. This has been a battle that people have begun to talk about ever since the release of Chainsaw Man's newest movie, The Reze Arc. And honestly, I can't blame people for asking these questions. Both Bakugo and Reze's abilities revolve around utilizing explosions. For Bakugo, his sweat is akin to nitroglycerin, a liquid explosive that he's able to explode either to fire off blasts or propel himself, while Reze, as a hybrid of the Bomb Devil, is essentially, well, one big walking bomb, able to turn her head, fingers, arms, or entire body into explosions. But if you pit the two of these very different characters against each other, who would come out victorious? Would it be Reze with her incredible regeneration ability, or Bakugo with his long-distance shots? Reze with her USSR-trained acrobatics and hand-to-hand combat, or Bakugo and his newfound blistering speed? Well, today, I'm hoping to answer that exact question, because today I'm going to pour through all of the feats of Bakugo and Reze and decide once and for all, if the two of them were pitted against each other in a death match, who would come out victorious. And thus today we're putting the week-old conversation to bed, because today we're talking Bakugo versus Reze. But before we get to talking on anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you're looking for one additional Nick video every single week, you can go ahead and find my Naruto reaction series using the fourth wall link in my description below. We are on to Neji versus Hinata, so things are getting pokey. So, like with any versus battle, before we dive into this hypothetical fight, we have to establish exactly how strong these two contestants are. We have to identify their feats, how strong their attack potency is, how fast they are, and what their hacks are. And since I'm a gentleman, we're gonna go with the ladies first. And thus, first up is Reze. Listen, for those of you who have either read the Chainsaw Man manga or watched the literal peak fiction movie that is the Reze arc, you would understand why people would start asking the question if Reze could beat Bakugo in a fight. Because the second half of the Reze arc, or about the last 45 minutes of the movie, is Reze moving on complete and total demon time. Moving in such a way it feels as though that the combined forces of some of the strongest fighters in the special division have no chance against her. See, not only does Reze, even before she transforms, wipe out an assassin / serial killer by doing the hurricane around him and choking him to death, but after she transforms, she's able to take down entire wings of devil hunters. She's able to pressure incredibly powerful devil hunters like Aki into acknowledging the fact that if he slips up even once, she'll kill him. And mind you, this is after Aki makes a contract with the future devil to see a couple of seconds into the future. Aki knows what she's going to do and is still worried about not being able to dodge it. I mean, this is a woman who basically controlled the Typhoon Devil, was able to pressure the combined forces of Beam and Denji simultaneously, and nearly wiped out an entire city with her explosions while fighting against the two of them. Honestly, everything that she accomplishes in the Reze arc seems a fair bit more impressive than a lot of the things that we've seen from Bakugo. And mind you that when she's transformed, she's also a hybrid like Denji, meaning so long as she has a constant supply of blood, she's able to regenerate infinitely. And how is Bakugo going to defeat somebody who's able to regenerate infinitely? Well, let's go ahead and get into her feats and establish just how strong she is. Because, well, yes, we saw her do a lot of cool things. How exactly strong were all those cool things? And really, the only way to tackle this is chronologically. So, pretty much the first thing that we ever see Reze do in terms of a scalable feat was when she was supposedly cornered by a serial killer / assassin who was hoping to use her to get to Denji. However, even though he was armed with a knife and she was just some scared high school adjacent girl on the roof of a high school that she broke into, she was able to maneuver around this assassin and strangle him to death. Now, I know some of you are probably saying, oh, that's not all that impressive, he's just a guy with a knife, but it's important to remember here that he also had access to at least a portion of the Typhoon Devil's powers. The Typhoon Devil, who, mind you, is not only massive, but was also able to flood multiple city blocks. And while there really is no way for us to know exactly how strong this guy was, immediately after killing him and confronting the Typhoon Devil, we see that the Typhoon Devil is actually afraid of Reze, implying that Reze, as the Bomb Devil hybrid, has a fair amount of superiority to the Typhoon Devil, who is objectively one of the stronger devils we've seen. Now, once again, this isn't really a scalable feat, however, it is important to know. There's very clearly a fear-based hierarchy amongst the devils, and the fact that the Typhoon Devil is afraid of the Bomb Devil not only implies that the Bomb Devil is stronger than the Typhoon Devil, but also implies that the Typhoon Devil's fear of the Bomb Devil actually makes the Bomb Devil stronger. Now, pretty much the first actually scalable feat we see from Reze is after she transforms. I mean, yes, technically before she transforms, transform, she's able to bite off Denji's tongue, slice off his hand, slit his throat, and this is all after Denji has done a fair amount of training as Chainsaw Man, mind you. So his durability has been heightened since the beginning of the manga, even in his base form. But really, when it comes down to it, the best indicator we have of exactly how strong Reze was, or at least one of the indicators, is when Beam dragged Denji to a devil hunting headquarters that was not only a large building, but was also filled with a bunch of relatively high devil hunters. And while one would assume that an entire building filled with devil hunters would be good enough for one devil, that was not the case. As not only was Reze able to kill not only the vice captain, but also the captain of this devil hunting headquarters, but she was also able to systematically wipe out every single one of the devil hunters in the building and destroy the building itself. And therein lies our first truly scalable feat from Reze. Through the combined effort of detonating her head and her body, she was able to destroy a large building, which in this moment means her AP is at least large building to large building plus. But she doesn't stop there. She's also able to severely injure Beam, who is a powerful fiend, cave in an 18-wheeler with an explosive punch, launch Denji as Chainsaw Man through multiple concrete reinforced with rebar walls, and by hitting a semi-unconscious Denji with multiple explosions, she was able to whittle away at his body until he was nothing more than a head and a torso. And this means that her explosions very easily surpass the durability of Denji's body. And she is repeatedly shown to be much stronger than Denji. I mean, she literally turns her leg into a missile in chapter 48 and axe kicks Denji into the ground so hard that he basically explodes. And the percussive force of this blow is so great that not only does it create a crater in the ground, but it also blows the windows out of all adjacent buildings. And herein lies one of Reze's most important hacks. She's able to turn her fingers, her limbs, her head into a multitude of different explosives. See, whether it's turning her leg into a missile, her arms into torpedoes. Really, if any situation calls for any explosive of any kind, Reze's got it covered. And she's able to get rid of her leg or her arms or her fingers because of her near infinite regeneration. See, because while yes, in the beginning of Chainsaw Man, the concept of hybrids are talked about as if they're rare, they're really not all that rare, or they're all trying to find Denji. And while Denji might be the strongest amongst all the hybrids, there is one uniform truth amongst all hybrids, and that is regeneration. So long as blood is supplied to a hybrid, and whatever turns them into a devil is done, like the pulling of a chainsaw ripcord or the pulling of a grenade's pin, they'll be able to regenerate indefinitely. Denji has been cut up into 100 little pieces and put in boxes, but so long as he's given blood and you pull his ripcord, he's good to go. And the same can be said for Reze. And considering the fact that unlike Denji, her fighting style lends itself to losing arms and legs and fingers and heads, it's actually not even all that crazy to assume that Reze's regeneration might even be greater than that of Denji's, which makes her a really tough out in any kind of deathmatch battle. Because unless Reze is fighting against Bakugo in an abandoned city with no civilians, something that based off how both MHA and Chainsaw Man have played out probably wouldn't happen, as the majority of both of these manga's fights do tend to take place in rather crowded cities, Reze's gonna have a pretty constant supply of blood to feed on to regenerate herself. But anyways, I'm getting off track here. Now that we've talked about a multitude of feats that we saw from Reze in her battle against Beam, Denji, and Aki, where exactly does her AP fall? Well, while we don't have as much evidence to scale Reze as we do with somebody like Bakugo, who comes from a 450 long chapter manga that he is majoritively featured in, we do have enough to pretty conclusively say that Reze, in her transformed state, falls somewhere between large building level to multi-city block level in terms of AP. But realistically, she probably falls somewhere in that middle region, like city block level, which in the early parts of the Chainsaw Man story was a wildly impressive AP to hold on to. Part 2 of Chainsaw Man is kind of scaled out of control, if we're being entirely real. I mean, it's not bad. Tatsuki Fujimoto is probably the greatest working mangaka right now, but like people have gotten a lot stronger. But yeah, her AP probably falls somewhere in the region of city block level. But how fast is she? Well, she's quick. In fact, one of the most intimidating things about her during the Reze arc is that she's faster than everybody else. See, not only was she able to slice Denji's throat and slice off his hand before he realized what was happening, but also probably the most impressive speed feat that she ever pulls off is that at the end of her arc, when Makima confronts her in the alley on her way to the cafe, she's actually able to dash behind Makima to try to launch a counter attack. attack, and may have actually been able to pull it off if it weren't for the intervention of Angel. Not to mention in her battle against all of the devil hunters in that devil hunting headquarters that she wipes out, she was able to avoid multiple different attacks from the Fox Devil, blow up gun-wielding devil hunters before they even got the chance to shoot, completely outpace Denji to the point where he was literally helpless in battle against her, and force Aki to struggle to block her attacks even though he can literally peer into the future. Not to mention she's also able to use her explosions in a very similar traversal-like way as Bakugo, where by capitalizing on explosions that she creates, she's able to propel herself in straight lines at incredibly high speeds. Like when she used an explosion to blast herself in front of the escaping beam, or did this over an even longer distance when she used this mode of transportation to blast herself on top of Aki's car while he was driving away on the highway. And she's able to use these explosions repeatedly to basically simulate flight, kind of exactly how Bakugo does it. And therefore, in a battle against Bakugo, if Bakugo wanted to take the fight into the air, Reze would be perfectly comfortable up there. So with all of these speed feats taken into mind, like being able to speed blitz somebody with precognition, being able to outfire gunmen who already have their guns drawn on her, speed blitz Denji, catch up with Beam, fly herself onto a speeding away car, and so much more, Reze's speed is pretty comfortably somewhere in the region of Supersonic Plus. So Reze has City Block AP, Supersonic Plus speeds, and nigh infinite regeneration. Is she immune to explosions? This is a big conversational point surrounding the concept of Reze and Bakugo fighting. Because if Reze is immune to explosions, well then how is Bakugo going to kill her? But unfortunately for Reze, she's not immune to explosions. Yes, she has a high durability to explosions in the same way that Bakugo has a high durability to explosions, because she's able to use explosions to propel herself. And when she uses explosions to propel herself, she doesn't get blown to smithereens. However, devils in the Chainsaw Man universe aren't necessarily immune to the things that they are devils of. Denji's able to use his own chainsaws to muddy his brain so he doesn't have to think about things. And he wouldn't be able to cut into his own brain using his own chainsaws if he was immune to damage from chainsaws. On top of this, when Reze does use her head or her body or her arms or her fingers to cause explosions, those body parts are eviscerated by the explosions. Now, yes, she is able to regenerate those lost limbs all but immediately, but those limbs are still affected by the explosions she's creating. If she was immune to explosive force, she would be able to throw her head through a window, have it explode, and then pick up that same head later and place it back on top of her shoulders. But that's not the case. So no, Reze is not immune to explosions. While she may have an explosion durability, it is not complete immunity. Now, with all that said, how strong is Bakugo? Do his feats place him higher than City Block level with Supersonic Plus speeds and a nigh infinite regeneration? Well, I'll tell you one thing right now. Bakugo doesn't have any kind of regenerative ability. Yes, Edgeshot is able to bring him back from the brink of death after his battle against Shigaraki, but that has nothing to do with Bakugo. I mean, yes, Bakugo was the one responsible for restarting his own heart with a bead of his sweat that exploded inside of him and got his heart beating once again, but fundamentally Shigaraki would have flatlined Bakugo if it wasn't for Edgeshot dedicating 90% of his body mass to stitching Bakugo's body back together. So immediately right there, that's a point for Reze. If Reze is able to do any kind of damage to Bakugo, Bakugo's not going to be able to regenerate it in the same way that Reze will be able to regenerate any and all damage done to her by Bakugo. So things are looking pretty good for Reze, right? No, no, not at all. Listen, there's a reason that we talked about the abilities of Reze first, and that's because I like to build suspense, but Criminy on a bike. Is this literally the encapsulation of Coughing Baby versus Hydrogen Bomb? Even if we consider the fact that nuclear weapons in Part 2 of Chainsaw Man have returned, and therefore maybe if Reze was to return, she would return massively more powerful, because kind of in the same way that it's revealed that the Tank Devil and the Gun Devil are kind of children of the War Devil, it would make a fair amount of sense that the Nuclear Weapons Devil is a child of the Bomb Devil, because a nuclear weapon is a bomb. That doesn't necessarily mean that Reze would get the abilities of nuclear weapons. The Katana Devil and the Sword Devil are two different devils. And while yes, Asa is able to assimilate the powers of the Gun Devil and the Tank Devil, it's not like as the War Devil she intrinsically had their abilities. She had to pull them from countries away and turn them into her arms. And while yes, if it was revealed that the Nuclear Weapons Devil was a child of the Bomb Devil, maybe, just maybe, Reze would be able to do something similar to what Asa does and assimilate the Nuclear Weapons Devil into her. Even if she did that, she still probably wouldn't stand a chance against Bakugo. And mind you, what I'm talking about right now now is a hypothetical. If we just start talking about Bakugo's feats from My Hero Academia's fourth movie, World Heroes Mission, I don't remember which number it is, the things that this man has pulled off are kind of insane. See, in World Heroes Mission, even though this is a story that revolves mostly around Deku, and yes, the MHA movies are canon. Every single one of them has been canonized by the involvement of characters from these movies in the manga. Whether that's the Shield family, Nine, or Rudo? I forget who's the one with the bird from World Heroes Mission. I think it's Rudo or Rudy. Being shown throughout the manga, every single one of these movies has become canonized. Anyways, in World Heroes Mission, we see Bakugo use a howitzer blast that's able to take out both of the Serpentor twins simultaneously. Now, the crater created from this howitzer blast has been calced, and apparently the percussive force in order to create a crater this large would require for Bakugo to deliver an explosive force of around 2 megatons of TNT. Now, the little boy nuclear weapon, the one that was dropped on Hiroshima, delivered an explosive force of 0.015 megatons of TNT. The Tsar Bomba, the largest ever tested nuclear weapon, delivered an explosive force of 50 megatons of TNT, aka 3,000 times more explosive force than the bomb used on Hiroshima, but only 25 times more powerful than the explosive force that Bakugo delivered to take out both of the Serpentor twins. And that is to say that this explosion that took place in the second to last MHA movie starts Bakugo off at a small city level AP. Now, if you don't want to talk about movie feats, it's established in chapter 275 that Bakugo is equal in power to a 30% Deku. And a 30% Deku is also pretty easily calced up to small city level. However, if you do want to talk about movie feats, in the final MHA movie, You're Next, the bad guy was a man by the name of Darkmight, or Valdo Galini, and he had the quirk of alchemy, which allowed him to transmute the matter of any non-living thing that he ever touched into whatever he wanted. It's like Overhaul, but stronger. And the way that Darkmight uses this ability is to give himself a suit that allows for him to resemble a young All Might in his prime. And therefore, the villain of My Hero Academia's You're Next is basically a prime All Might. And while he's not able to mimic all of prime All Might's strength, he's a pretty close clone. And he's actually able to get even closer to the power of a prime All Might by working with a person by the name of Anna, who has an over-modification quirk that essentially allows for Darkmight to over-modify the suit in order to give him more and more power. And it takes the combined forces of Shoto, a full cowl Deku, and Bakugo to take him down. But over the course of this battle, while Deku is demonstrated to be probably the strongest amongst the three of these people, Bakugo is fighting alongside probably the strongest iteration of Shoto we've ever seen in a full cowl max power Deku. And therefore, if Bakugo is able to fight against somebody who loosely resembled the power of a prime All Might, that right there is a multi-continent level feat. Nick, what are you, a multi-continent level? Yeah, a non-prime All Might in his final battle against All For One, I guess not including Tech Might, was able to split the sky with a punch, causing it to be sunny in Japan for several days. And we learned from All Might's battle against the Nomu that 300 punches in his weakened state were equal to 5 in his prime state, meaning that he's gotten 60 times weaker since his prime. And it's told to us that a prime All Might was stronger than the strongest iteration of Deku we ever saw, which happens somewhere around chapter 420 of the manga. And in that fight, when prime Deku was battling against Shigaraki, Deku was able to clear the weather from Japan to America. And if you are able to fluctuate whether or not there is clouds in the sky from Japan in America, that is a multi-continent level feat, and All Might was stronger than that. Not to mention that Bakugo was able to go toe-to-toe with the likes of a rewound All For One. He was able to injure a complete Shigaraki with his howitzer impact so bad that Shigaraki identified that as a technique he needed to take away from Bakugo. And while some of you are saying, oh, well, he barely injured Shigaraki with that attack, yes, you're right, he did barely injure Shigaraki, but Sun Eater's plasma cannon, which is supposed to be one of the most powerful techniques we've ever seen, wasn't even able to do that much damage. So the fact that he was able to basically be the one responsible for killing All For One, and he was able to injure by himself a complete Shigaraki, and go toe-to-toe with Darkmight in You're Next, shows us pretty conclusively that Bakugo by the end of the manga is a multi-continent level threat in AP. But who knows? Maybe Reze's got him beat in speed. No, not even actually close. Reze, yes, shows off supersonic plus feats, which implies that she's somewhere in the region of like Mach 3 to Mach 7. In the battle against complete Shigaraki on the floating UA, Bakugo is able to keep up in speed with not only Mirko, but also Edgeshot, two of the well-known fastest heroes on Earth. And not only is he keeping up with Mirko and Edgeshot, but he's also keeping up with the natural growth of a full-power Shigaraki. In fact, he's grown so fast by the time that he fights against complete Shigaraki that he's able to take him by surprise. Not only landing a flurry of attacks of his own on Shigaraki that are able to damage him, but also dodging Shigaraki's attacks to the point where Shigaraki actually starts to get nervous. But by far and away the most impressive speed feat that Bakugo ever has is when he learns to use the beads of sweat that built up all over his body to propel his entire body simultaneously rather than just using his hands. Something that he doesn't learn how to do until he dies and is brought back to life by Edgeshot. And when Bakugo masters this technique and learns to use the pain to propel himself, not only is his increase in speed praised by All Might, one of the fastest people to ever grace the earth, but he's also able to catch up with a flying, rewound All For One who's trying to escape him, even though All For One is miles away from him. And as All For One is very easily relativistic to relativistic plus, that is to say the speed of light, being able to catch up with him even though he starts with a head start means that Bakugo is very easily relativistic in speed. So who wins in a fight between the boy who has a multi-continent level AP and relativistic speeds and the girl with city block level AP and supersonic plus speeds? I'll give you a guess. Yes, obviously, Reze does have nigh infinite regeneration, but nigh infinite generation doesn't matter when Bakugo atomizes her. This fight is not close. There is not even hypothetical situations where this fight is close. Bakugo's immunity to explosions is actually so much higher than Reze's, it's laughable. He's able to survive the explosive force of his own explosions, something that Reze could not do. Bakugo wins 11 times out of 10. I cannot believe anybody else has the inverse of this opinion. Honestly, the best possible fight between Reze and Bakugo takes place between beginning of the manga Bakugo and final form Reze. But by the time you get to like chapter 50, Bakugo is too strong for Reze. Now, does this make Chainsaw Man a worse manga than MHA? No. God, no. But if we're doing hypothetical battles here, Bakugo wins by a mile. And I'm not curious to hear your opinions on this battle. If you believe that Reze wins, you're wrong. But I don't know. Tell me how your day was in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Now, if you'll excuse me, my mother's here, and I have to take her out to lunch.